I always thought family was supposed to be your safe place, the one corner of the world where you would never feel like an outsider. But in my house, I was treated like a guest who overstayed his welcome. Every laugh that didn't include me, every decision made without my voice, every whispered conversation that stopped when I entered the room. It all reminded me that I was little more than a stranger under my own roof. My father, cold and dismissive, would look at me as though I carried some defect that embarrassed him. My mother, though softer, seemed to be more concerned with keeping the peace than with protecting me. And then there were my siblings, two older brothers who made it their daily mission to remind me that I didn't belong. They would mock the way I dressed, the way I spoke, even the way I ate at the dinner table. Sometimes, I thought they only kept me around because they enjoyed having someone to bully. It was strange, really, because we lived under one roof but existed in separate worlds. Theirs was filled with inside jokes, loud conversations, and a kind of careless confidence that comes from being loved unconditionally. Mine was quiet, lonely, and heavy with the weight of questions I never dared to ask aloud. Why am I treated this way? What did I do wrong? One evening, as the family sat down for dinner, I reached for a piece of bread, only for my eldest brother, Ryan, to snatch the basket away with a smirk. "Careful, don't touch too much," he said. "You might dirty it." My other brother, Samir, chuckled, stabbing his fork into his food. "Let him eat, Ryan. He has nothing else in life, poor thing." This is probably the highlight of his day. The laughter that followed was sharp and cruel. I glanced at my parents, hoping for some intervention, but my father simply kept eating, as though he hadn't heard a thing. My mother gave a weak smile as if to smooth over the tension, but her silence was louder than their mockery. I pushed my plate away. "I'm not hungry," I muttered, standing up. "Of course you're not," Ryan sneered. "Strangers don't eat with the family anyway." That word, stranger, hit harder than he could have imagined. I went to my room, shut the door, and pressed my back against it, my chest heaving with suppressed rage. Their laughter echoed in my head like a curse. Every insult, every act of exclusion, it was all piling up inside me, brick by brick, until I felt like I was suffocating. But what they didn't know was that I carried something inside me, something they could never take away. A secret. A truth so powerful that one day it would turn their world upside down. I wasn't powerless, though they thought I was. I wasn't empty, though they mocked me as if I had nothing. I had built something of my own in silence, far from their eyes. And while they dismissed me as a failure, I was crafting the very weapon that would one day bring them to their knees. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My body trembled not with fear, but with a growing fire. I remembered all the times I had been overlooked at school events because no one from my family showed up to cheer me on. I remembered the birthdays that passed without gifts, the holidays where I was given leftover attention like scraps tossed to a beggar. I remembered the sting of being told, again and again, that I was nothing compared to my brothers. But in the shadows of that neglect, I had learned resilience. In the silence of my isolation, I had discovered ambition. And in the cracks of their cruelty, I had found a reason to rise. The following morning, I walked into the kitchen to find my family buzzing with excitement about Ryan's upcoming job interview. My father clapped him on the back, proud and glowing. My mother fussed over his tie. Samir joked that soon Ryan would be the star of the family, carrying their name to new heights. And me, I poured myself a cup of coffee, invisible as ever. Not one of them noticed the faint smile tugging at the corner of my lips, because while they dreamed of Ryan's future, they had no idea that mine was already written, and it would overshadow everything they thought they were building. One day, they would see me. One day, the stranger in the family would become the one name they couldn't escape. But until then, I would let them keep underestimating me. Their blindness was my shield, and my secret was my sword. And when the time came, I would strike with such precision that they would never recover. The days passed, each one the same as the last, me on the sidelines, watching my family celebrate themselves while I lingered in the shadows. But even in silence, I was working, building, shaping the future they would never see coming. I had discovered my passion years ago, in the quiet corners of the library and in the glow of a second-hand laptop that I bought with the little money I earned from odd jobs. Technology. While my brothers were busy showing off at parties or basking in the easy approval of my parents, I was diving deep into code, algorithms, and systems. I built things that no one around me could even begin to understand. I created designs, apps, and solutions that went unnoticed in my household but started to turn heads online. By 18, I was already freelancing for small businesses abroad. By 20, I had created software that was quietly generating more money than my father made in a year. But I didn't tell them. Not a word. Because I wanted them to keep believing I was the nobody, the failure, the shadow. The day they discovered the truth, I wanted their world to shatter. Still, their cruelty never ceased. At the dinner table, Samir would smirk and say things like, "Don't worry, one day you'll find something you're good at. Maybe washing dishes." My father would nod in agreement, sipping his tea. If he even manages that. Some people are just born without drive. Every insult was a spark, and inside me, the fire grew hotter. One night, I heard my parents talking in the living room while they thought I was asleep. My mother's voice was hushed but worried. "Don't you think we're too hard on him? He's still our son." On my father sighed. "He's different. He doesn't have what it takes. Look at Ryan, look at Samir. They're strong, ambitious. He's weak. If we coddle him, he'll never survive in the real world. Better he learns his place now." His words cut deep, but they also fueled me. My place. I would show him my place. I would show them all. The turning point came when Ryan's big job interview fell through. He came home with his face pale and his tie loosened, slamming the door behind him. My parents hovered concerned. "What happened?" My mother asked softly. They said I didn't have enough experience." Ryan muttered. "Someone else got the position." My father's jaw tightened. "It's all right. You'll get another chance. You're my son. You'll succeed." I stood in the doorway, watching the scene. Nobody noticed me. Nobody asked where I was coming from, or why I looked tired after another long night working on a project that was about to secure me a major contract overseas. In that moment, I realized something. Their blindness wasn't just ignorance. It was arrogance. They were so sure of who I was, so convinced that I was nothing, that they didn't even bother to look. And that was their mistake. A week later, I received an email that changed everything. My software had been picked up by a large international firm, one that wanted to license it for millions. Millions. I stared at the screen, my hands trembling, tears welling in my eyes. Not because I doubted myself, but because I knew what this meant. The secret I had guarded so carefully was now bigger than I ever imagined. That evening, my family was gathered around the television, laughing at some comedy show. I walked past them, silent, clutching my phone with the contract attached. Nobody asked me where I was going. Nobody cared. I went to my room, shut the door, and allowed myself a rare moment of release. I laughed. I laughed so hard it echoed off the walls, tears streaming down my face. They thought I was nothing, yet here I was, on the brink of something that would make them choke on every cruel word they had ever thrown at me. But I didn't reveal anything. Not yet. Timing was everything. Revenge, I realized, wasn't about sudden outbursts. It was about patience, precision, and impact. When I struck, it would be so devastating that they would never recover from the humiliation. In the meantime, I watched them continue their lives as if I didn't exist. Ryan spent nights sulking, Samir bragged about meaningless victories, and my father kept his disappointed gaze reserved for me. Each moment added fuel to the fire I was carefully stoking. I knew the day would come when they would beg for my help. And when that day arrived, I would finally let them see the stranger they had ignored. The stranger who had become everything they could never be. The money came first, and then the recognition. My software began circulating in markets I had only dreamed about, and within months I was no longer just a freelancer scraping by. I was an entrepreneur, a name whispered in circles my family could never imagine entering. Yet inside the house, nothing changed. To them, I was still the quiet, awkward son who sat at the table in silence, the shadow they had learned to ignore. I kept it that way deliberately. I lived two lives, one in their suffocating world of contempt, and another in the vast, exciting world that I had built for myself. In the mornings, I endured their jabs and their laughter. In the nights, I negotiated contracts with foreign investors, spoke to people who treated me with respect, and watched my bank account swell with numbers that even my father's lifetime earnings couldn't touch. And all the while, I waited. The cracks in my family's perfect image began to show sooner than I expected. Ryan, the golden child, couldn't seem to land a stable job. Every rejection chipped away at his pride, but he disguised it with arrogance, throwing his weight around the house as if he still carried the world on his shoulders. Samir, on the other hand, got tangled in debts after reckless spending and failed investments. I heard the heated arguments between him and my father late at night, shouted words about money, about failure, about how he was ruining the family's reputation. Irony. The same father who praised them for their strength and drive was now watching his prized sons falter. And me, the stranger? I was thriving in silence. It all came to a head one rainy evening. The air was heavy with thunder as I sat in my room, working on a new project. Suddenly, my mother knocked on the door, a rare occurrence. She peeked in, her face soft, almost hesitant. "Your father wants to see you," she said. I frowned. "Me?" She nodded. "Just come." I followed her into the living room where the entire family sat in tense silence. My father's face was lined with stress, his hands gripping a pile of papers. Rayan sat with his head bowed, Samir scowling at the floor. "What's going on?" I asked cautiously. My father cleared his throat, his pride visibly wounded. "We're facing some financial difficulties." I stood still, suppressing the smirk that threatened to appear. "What kind of difficulties?" I pressed. Rayan muttered, "It's bad. Samir messed up with some loans and my interview rejections haven't helped. Dad had to cover for him. And now—" "Enough," my father snapped. He turned to me, his eyes narrowing. "The point is, we need money. And since you don't seem to contribute much around here, maybe it's time you help this family out." There it was, after years of being invisible, of being mocked, of being the stranger in my own home. They finally looked at me. But not out of love, not out of respect. Out of desperation. I let the silence stretch, watching them squirm. My mother wrung her hands together nervously. My brothers refused to meet my gaze. My father's jaw was tight, his pride bleeding into anger. "How much?" I asked finally, my voice calm. 50,000, he said quickly, almost too quickly, as if afraid he would lose his nerve. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Not cruel but amused. 50,000. "You think I have that kind of money lying around?" Samir scoffed. "Of course you don't. You barely do anything. Why are we even asking him?" I turned my gaze to him, sharp and cold. "Careful, brother. You might not like the answer you get." For the first time, they all looked at me differently. Suspicion flickered in their eyes. Doubt, curiosity. It was the moment I had been waiting for. The first crack in the walls they had built around me. "I'll think about it," I said simply, standing to leave. Behind me, I heard my father's voice, low and tense. "Don't take too long. This family needs you." Those words echoed in my mind long after I shut my door. This family needs you. After all the years of rejection, the nights of loneliness, the cruel laughter, they needed me. And they had no idea just how much I had become. I sat at my desk, staring at my computer screen, my reflection faintly visible in the glow. My time had come. The secret I had guarded so fiercely was ready to be revealed. And when it was, they would never look at me the same way again. But it wouldn't just be about showing them who I had become. No, that would be too easy. It would be about making them feel the weight of every moment they had dismissed me, every insult, every time they treated me like a stranger. They would see me not as the invisible one, but as the one who held their entire world in his hands. The storm outside raged on, lightning splitting the sky, and for the first time in years I smiled openly. My revenge was no longer a dream, it was a reality waiting to unfold. The next morning, I woke to the sound of muffled voices in the kitchen. My family was arguing, their voices rising and falling like waves crashing against rocks. I sat on the edge of my bed listening. "Wu can't wait for him forever," Rayan hissed. "He doesn't have anything. We're wasting time." "You don't know that," my mother whispered urgently. "He said he'd think about it." Samir barked a laugh. "Think about what? He can't even afford proper clothes. Look at him. You think he has 50,000 just sitting around?" My father's voice cut through theirs, stern and final. "Nuff. If he has anything at all, we need it. I don't care how he managed to get it. He lives under this roof. He eats our food. He owes us." I clenched my fists, their words burning into me like fire. Owes them. After years of being ignored, humiliated, and treated as though I wasn't even one of them. No, they owed me. And soon, they would understand that debt. That afternoon, I left the house without a word. I went to the office I had secretly rented months ago in the city. A sleek, glass-fronted building where my name was etched on the door in bold letters. Inside, my small but loyal team was already at work. They greeted me with respect, their voices warm and genuine, so different from the cold indifference of my own family. Here I wasn't invisible. Here I was their leader. "Congratulations, boss," one of them said, handing me a folder. "The licensing deal has officially gone through. The first payment just cleared." I opened the folder, scanning the documents. Numbers stared back at me. Numbers so large they could wipe away my family's debts 100 times over. I leaned back in my chair, letting the reality sink in. I had done it. The boy they had dismissed, the stranger they had ignored, had built an empire under their very noses. For the rest of the day, I worked with my team, finalizing details for the next project, planning expansions, setting goals that stretched further than anything my family had ever dreamed. But even as I immersed myself in this world, I couldn't shake the thought of them, sitting in that kitchen, worrying about money, arguing over scraps. When I returned home that night, the house was unusually quiet. My father sat in the living room, staring at the floor. My mother's eyes were red, as though she'd been crying. Rayan and Samir were nowhere to be seen. "You're late," my father said gruffly, not looking up. I had things to do, I replied evenly. He lifted his gaze, his pride clearly battling with desperation. Did you think about what I asked? I let the silence linger, savoring the moment. Then I said, I did, and I'll help, but on one condition. His brows furrowed. Condition? Yes, I said, my voice calm but sharp. From now on you will treat me like a son. Not a stranger, not a failure, a son. And you will make sure Rayan and Samir do the same. My father's jaw tightened. For a moment, I thought he might explode, but then his shoulders slumped ever so slightly. He was cornered, and he knew it. Fine, he muttered. I leaned forward, my eyes locked on his. No, not fine. I want you to say it, I want to hear it from your mouth. The room was thick with tension. My mother glanced between us nervously, her hands trembling. Finally, my father spoke, his voice low and bitter. You're my son. I'll treat you like one. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a victory. I'll transfer the money tomorrow, I said, standing. But remember, this isn't charity. This is me saving the same family that turned its back on me. Don't forget that. I walked out of the room, leaving him stunned, my mother whispering my name softly as if she no longer recognized me. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about how easily they had bent when faced with desperation. It wasn't respect, not yet. But it was the beginning of their realization. Soon, they would know the full truth. They would see the empire I had built, the power I held, and they would understand what it meant to underestimate me. And when that day came, it wouldn't just be about money. It would be about making them feel the weight of every wound they had inflicted on me, every cruel word, every moment of neglect. They wanted me to save them. I would, but on my terms. For the first time in my life, I slept peacefully under that roof, knowing that the balance of power had shifted. The stranger in the family was no longer invisible. The stranger was becoming the master of their fate. The transfer went through the next day. 50,000, just like that, erased their immediate crisis. My father held the receipt in his hands as if it were a miracle. My mother thanked me quietly, though her eyes betrayed both relief and confusion. Rayan and Samir were less subtle. They looked at me as though seeing me for the first time, suspicion flickering in their expressions. Where did you get that kind of money? Samir asked bluntly, his voice edged with disbelief. I shrugged. Does it matter? Of course it matters, Rayan snapped. You've been hiding something. No one just has 50,000 lying around. My father shot them both a warning glare, but I could see it in his eyes too. The same burning question. They all wanted to know the truth, but none of them dared to push too hard. Yet, I let them wonder, let them stew in their doubts. Their silence was my victory. For years I had been invisible. Now I was the one mystery they couldn't ignore. In the following weeks, the house grew tense. My father became oddly polite around me, though it was strained, forced, as if he were choking on the words. My mother hovered, watching me with a mixture of guilt and curiosity. My brothers, however, were restless. Samir tried to pry, asking me about where I went during the day, what I was working on. Rayan, on the other hand, grew distant, his pride unable to stomach the idea that the brother he had mocked all his life might be more successful than him. One evening, I returned home late after a long meeting with investors. As I entered, I caught Rayan standing in the hallway, rifling through my bag. What are you doing? I asked sharply. He froze, his face paling. I was just looking for proof. I finished for him. His jaw tightened. You think you're smart, hiding things from us. But this is our family. You owe us honesty. I stepped closer, my voice low and cold. Honesty. For years, you mocked me, humiliated me, treated me like a stranger in my own home. And now you want honesty. Orion flinched, but his pride forced him to hold his ground. You think money makes you better than us? I laughed bitterly. No, Ryan. Money didn't make me better. I always was. You just never saw it. He stormed off, slamming his door behind him. But I knew the seed of doubt had taken root. The balance was shifting further. A few days later, Samir cornered me in the backyard. His tone was different, less confrontational, more desperate. Look, he said, running a hand through his hair, I'm in trouble. More than Dad knows. The debts, they're worse than I told him. If I don't pay soon, things could get ugly. Can you help me? Just a little more. I stared at him. The brother who had once laughed at me until my stomach ached from the humiliation. The brother who had called me useless, a burden, a mistake. And now here he was, begging. How much? I asked. Another 20, he whispered, shame coloring his voice. I smirked, shaking my head slowly. You'll get nothing. Consider it payback for every cruel word you threw at me. His face darkened. You can't do this. We're family. No, I said firmly. You made sure I was never family. Remember that. I walked away, leaving him trembling with anger and fear. It was the sweetest taste of justice I had ever known. The truth was, I could have paid his debt 10 times over. But revenge wasn't just about showing them my success. It was about making them feel the sting of their own choices. Let him suffer as I had suffered. Let him know what it felt like to reach out and find nothing but silence. That night, as I lay in bed, I heard raised voices again. Samir had confessed to my parents about the depth of his troubles. My father shouted, my mother cried, and Ryan accused me of being selfish. He has the money. Ryan said bitterly. I know he does. But he's holding out, he wants us to crawl. For once, he was right. I closed my eyes, a smile tugging at my lips. They were finally beginning to understand. I wasn't the stranger anymore. I was the one they depended on, the one they whispered about, the one who held their fate in his hands. But the real revelation was still to come. I hadn't shown them the full extent of my success. When I finally pulled back the curtain, it wouldn't just humble them, it would break them. And that moment was closer than they realized. The day came sooner than I expected. A prestigious business magazine had chosen to feature me on its cover. My face, the same one my family had ignored at the dinner table, now stared back from glossy pages across the country, under bold headlines that declared me a visionary, a rising entrepreneur who had shaken the tech world. The morning the issue was released, I placed a copy neatly on the dining table before anyone else woke up. Then I sat back, sipping my coffee, waiting. My mother was the first to stumble in, still in her robe. She froze when her eyes landed on the magazine. Her hand trembled as she picked it up, her lips parting in shock. This is you. Yes, I said calmly. Before she could respond, my father entered, his usual stern expression faltering as he saw the same cover. He snatched the magazine, flipping through it as if hoping it was some kind of mistake. But there it was, page after page detailing my success, the millions I had earned, the empire I had built. His face drained of color. Ryan and Samir arrived moments later. Samir blinked in disbelief, while Ryan's face twisted with something darker. Jealousy, shame, rage all rolled into one. You, he spat. This is a joke, it has to be. I leaned back in my chair, unbothered. It's no joke. While you laughed at me, mocked me, treated me like nothing, I was building everything. This empire, this success, this name, it's mine. And you never saw it coming because you were too busy looking down on me. Silence filled the room, heavy and suffocating. My father finally spoke, his voice low, almost broken. Why didn't you tell us? I let out a bitter laugh. Tell you. You never listened. You never cared. All you saw was a failure, a stranger. Why would I share my dreams with people who couldn't even look at me without disdain? My mother's eyes filled with tears. We were wrong, she whispered. So wrong. Rayan slammed his fist on the table. You think this makes you better than us? You're still nothing without family. I turned to him, my gaze cold. Family. You don't get to use that word. Family is love, support, protection. What you gave me was cruelty, rejection, humiliation. I was a stranger in my own home because you made me one. And now I'm the one you need. You can't deny it anymore. Samir's voice cracked as he spoke. Please help me. You know my debts are bad. If they come after me, I cut 'em off. Did you help me when I was drowning in loneliness? Did you stand up for me when they mocked me? No, you laughed the loudest. And now you want my help. I shook my head. You'll face the consequences of your choices, just as I did. My father tried to regain control, his pride battling his desperation. You can't turn your back on us, we're your blood? I stood, towering over them, my voice firm and unyielding. Blood means nothing without loyalty, without love. You taught me that. I paused, letting my words sink in. I don't owe you anything. Not anymore. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother wept quietly, clutching the magazine as if it were the last piece of me she could hold on to. My brothers sat in stunned defeat, their arrogance shattered. And my father, for the first time in my life, he looked small. I turned to leave, my footsteps echoing in the hollow house. At the door, I stopped and looked back one final time. You made me a stranger in this family. But that stranger has become someone greater than you'll ever be. Remember that. And then I walked out. From that day on, I didn't return to live under that roof. I built my life on my own terms, surrounded by people who valued me, respected me, believed in me. My family tried to reach out, calls, messages, even visits, but I answered rarely, if at all. Forgiveness wasn't impossible, but it wasn't owed. They had to live with the weight of what they had done, the emptiness of knowing they had lost me long before they realized who I truly was. I wasn't the stranger anymore. I was the storm that had swept through their lives, leaving behind the wreckage of their arrogance and the proof of my strength. And sometimes when I look back, I don't feel anger anymore. Just clarity. They taught me what it meant to be alone, and in that loneliness, I found myself. They tried to bury me, but I grew roots. They tried to silence me, but I found my voice. In the end, I didn't just take revenge. I reclaimed my place, not in their family, but in the world. And that was the sweetest justice of all.